Hey everyone, it's Steven. Today I have the 2025 Volvo EX30 Plus. Now this is Volvo's subcompact fully electric SUV, and it's actually the smallest SUV that Volvo currently makes, smaller than the already tiny XC40 and the C40. So this debuted in the 2025 model year, shaking things up in the very small segment that historically has been pretty much just the Kia Niro EV and the Hyundai Kona Electric, all these very small SUVs. However, this is going to be the most expensive vehicle in these segments, coming in at just below $45,000. Now that's actually quite cheap relative to a lot of the other larger SUVs these days, but as a subcompact SUV, this definitely doesn't have the practicality and the luxury touches that the larger vehicles have. So this is the lowest trim that currently is offered in the US. So you don't actually have the Core, which is available in other areas, but this one is the Plus trim, and then you've got the Ultra above that. The Plus trim comes at $44,900 for the MSRP. This one has literally no packages, no additional options, and with the destination fee, this one comes to about $46,000 as tested. That's actually, like I said, pretty cheap in these segments, especially with just how expensive vehicles are getting, new vehicles, especially in America. So with the Plus trim, you have a dual motor all-wheel drive setup. There's no single motor option available. That's on the Core trim that will be coming hopefully in 2026. But this one here has a dual motor setup, gets you 422 horsepower and 400 pound-feet of torque. That is a lot of power for a very, very small vehicle. This is actually the quickest production Volvo in history, making it 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds. In terms of range, you've got a 69 kilowatt-hour battery pack, which gives you 253 miles of all-electric range. Obviously, that's going to fluctuate a little bit depending on what you do. Here, I've been getting about 220, 230 miles on a full charge in the Chicago city traffic in the summer. So even though the battery pack itself is quite small, it's quite fuel efficient. You've got 116 city, 100 highway for a combined 109 miles per gallon equivalent. All right, let's take a look at the exterior of the 2025 Volvo EX30. So this is a new vehicle to Volvo's lineup, and it does carry a pretty unique style compared to their other SUVs that you probably know of, like the XC60 and XC90. So the front is still pretty similar, right? Of course, you don't have a grille. This is a fully electric vehicle, so no need for that. And you do have the iconic Thor's hammer headlights. They do a very cool startup dance when you walk up to it, which I love. I think that's a very nice, stylish addition on a pretty cheap vehicle. Usually it's more expensive vehicles and higher trims that get those cool light dances, but this one does have that. You actually do have a frunk as well here. It's a tiny little frunk, 0.2 cubic feet of space there. Really, it's going to be mainly for maybe a backpack or some water bottles or groceries, maybe your charging wires, things like that, but it's quite small. Otherwise, you've got the iconic Volvo logo at the very front, very simple, doesn't have the grille again or anything like that, so it looks pretty boring, I would say. The rest of the front fascia isn't the most interesting thing. You've got some different textures here at the bottom. You've got a bit of a lower lip sort of thing there. It's Scandinavian, right? So it's not going to be very flashy. That's kind of the cool part about Volvos, is that it's a bit of an undercover luxury vehicle. Going into the side profile here, you've got these 19-inch wheels here. These are going to be your black 5-spoke diamond cut alloy wheels. They look fine. Again, I'm just not a fan of that arrow wheel design where it kind of covers everything behind the wheel, but it looks fine. I don't think it's as ugly as some of Tesla's designs. And then going along the side profile here, it's a very short vehicle, right? You can see for an SUV, right, it's still a subcompact, making it very small. Legroom isn't going to be the greatest, headroom isn't going to be the greatest either, but it's okay. It's still more than you'd get in a sedan, right? So you can see I'm quite a bit taller than the vehicle, so it's definitely a pretty short vehicle, which makes it kind of a good blend between higher ride heights, but also a bit more spacious than a normal sedan. So all this is blacked out, right? You don't see any chrome on this, which I do like a lot. I guess you do see some chrome here on the EX30 lettering there, but aside from that, almost all of it is going to be blacked out. It looks very sleek, looks nice. I like that there's no chrome. It makes it look a little bit younger, right? Like this is for a younger crowd that's hopping on the Volvo train rather than the traditionally older audiences that Volvo has catered towards. So otherwise, this color here is called Vapor Gray. It's a pretty color that, you know, I think it's fine. It's kind of a bluish gray color, no cost option. In typical Scandinavian fashion, there aren't too many interesting color designs, though you can get this in a bright yellow, which is super cool. But aside from that, it's going to be black, shades of gray, things like that, right? In terms of getting in the car, this is the part that's kind of difficult, and I'll talk about this a bit more in the interior view, but you can see this button here, or not a button, but you can see this area where you can hold up your key card here to open the door. So that's kind of an interesting thing that a lot of EVs are doing, is having a key card rather than an actual key fob. In terms of actually opening the door, all very simple. You can get keyless entry with your phone, so you can use your phone as a digital key, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as well later. But otherwise, you can see you've got an interesting two-tone design, right? You've got the black roof and then you've got the vapor gray body color. So it is kind of a cool design there. You have a large charging port here that you can open up as well. You've got a lot of different charging styles available for you. And then at the very bottom, you've got that same kind of texture that actually goes throughout the entire vehicle. It's an interesting texture. It's not just a flat plastic piece. It's got some ridges on it, so it's kind of interesting. And again, the chrome EX30 here is actually one of the few areas that this vehicle shows that it's an EX30. They have it at the front, and they've also got it in the badging in the rear here. So the rear is really where you can tell this is a very new style of Volvo. This is very different from what you see in the XC60 and the C40 and things like that, right? You've got these really interesting bracketed, design here, and I actually really love this. I think this is a much more unique design than what you get in the other Volvos that you've seen these days. Traditionally, Volvo spells out its name. It's been like this for the last, 20 years now or something like that, but this looks very nice and luxurious in my opinion. And you've got the EX30 badging at the bottom as well, and then again, that same kind of texture at the bottom of the rear fascia here. You've got a windshield wiper as well, which I'm kind of surprised they didn't try to hide it underneath the spoiler, but it looks fine. You do have a bit of a little spoiler right here, making it look a little sporty, a little coupe-like. That's very, very common with SUVs these days. And the actual rear fascia is very flat, right? So that's also giving it that more sporty design. This is a very small and pretty nimble vehicle, so it's actually a very fun vehicle to drive around. And like I said, 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds makes this very fun, very spry vehicle. In terms of the actual trunk itself, you don't have that much space, right? As you would expect, you don't get nearly as much space as you do in even a compact SUV, right? Some of those, you often get 20 to 25 cubic feet of cargo space. This one, you have 12.4 cubic feet of cargo space, but it's still quite usable, right? You can see you can fit lots of suitcases, lots of bags and things like that in this trunk. If you lower the rear seats, you get up to 27 cubic feet of cargo space. So that makes it more like what you would expect in some of the larger SUVs. So still certainly not that much space, but it is certainly usable. And it is a power liftgate standard, which is pretty cool, what you would expect from a luxury brand SUV. All right, let's go into the interior of the 2025 Volvo EX30. So this is something that I complained about earlier, but you have to use a key card to actually get in the vehicle if you have the lowest trim, the Core, which actually isn't available yet in the US. But for the Plus and the Ultra, you can actually set up your digital phone as key, which is nice. But unfortunately for Turo, I didn't get that, so I have to use the phone, and it feels like going into a hotel, right? Like I have to badge in with my key, and then also use the key to lock the car, which just feels very, very archaic, honestly, and kind of, it's like cool, but it defeats the purpose of keyless entry, honestly. So going into the vehicle, you can see you've got some interesting colors here, which is very unique for Volvo. They tend to be very Scandinavian in their design, in that everything is black and white or gray. But you've got a cool pop of blue all throughout the cabin. Looks very, very neat. Kind of futuristic, I guess. That's kind of what they're going for with their EVs, in my opinion, is they're going for more of that interesting look, I suppose. So, a lot of different textures to talk about here. On the seats, you've got this blue cloth, basically. They call it indigo knit, and then they've also got the charcoal contrast, which is just a fancy word for black. But the charcoal here is going to be on that texture on the door panels, actually all across the bottom of the dash as well. It doesn't actually have a texture, so it's probably just plastic, but it looks interesting. It looks kind of dirty, and I think some people don't like that because, I mean, personally, I don't think it looks that great either. It is easy to clean, but it just looks kind of dirty. But it is a unique texture, so I guess that's a little, it pops a little bit. Otherwise here you've got what they call Nordico, and this is actually going to be Volvo's like synthetic leather. It doesn't feel the same as leather though, but it's very similar in its purpose. But otherwise you've got some nice stitching across most of this. You've got the Swedish flag, of course, as is typical with Volvos. And then the cloth is quite comfortable, keeps it cool, especially in the heat here. Unfortunately, this one actually doesn't have the climate package though, so you don't have heated or ventilated seats. You can also see that you've got some interesting door panels, right? You've got a lot of contrasted material. You've got the darker blue at the top. You've got some of that same indigo blue knit at the bottom. And I will notice that that's actually inside of the door pocket is all of that same cloth material. So it's not going to be the easiest thing to clean. I think that's what I hate about like when they put any sort of like fancy cloth like material in there, is that like if you spill anything in there, it just gets pain in the ass to clean. Otherwise, you've got a interesting, you know, kind of door handle or armrest, I guess, when you want to get out of the car or close the door. Obviously, you have that as your actual door handle right there with the chrome accent, which is pretty cool. You can also see right now that there's a little bit of ambient lighting right there. That's actually at max brightness. There's also ambient lighting in the door pockets as well, but otherwise it's just going to be right here on the dash. You have a few different color options, which I think are all very cool. They're all themes, so you have a gradient of color, which does look very beautiful. And I do love the graphics when you show it on the 12.3-inch tablet style display in the middle, but I really wish that you could actually just choose colors. It's weird to give you the option to select from like 5 different preset themes. I just wish they gave you the option to customize it yourself. You'll also notice another pop of color is going to be on these air vents. Very, very cool thing. I actually thought they had like not, you know, taken off the sticker or the plastic or something, but I realized this is actually just how it's designed to look. So you've got this blue, I guess they'll probably call it indigo, color going throughout these air vents. These vertical air vents are very iconic, very much part of the Volvo design language since early on, and they've kept them in their EV here, but they make it look cool with this little blue. You've also got blue up here on the upper dash, and then you'll notice you've got the beautiful Harman Kardon sound bar at the very front. One of the best parts of this vehicle is going to be the sound system. It is an excellent sound system for a $45,000 car. I honestly think this is the best sound system I've ever heard at this price range. You've got a fantastic subwoofer, fantastic sound quality. You can adjust the levels, you can adjust all the sound levels in terms of frequencies actually, so they don't just say bass, treble, mids, they actually have the frequency there as well. You can also adjust the amount of surround sound that you want to choose, so you've got some really cool options there. All right, let's take a look at this 12.3-inch tablet display. So this is much better, in my opinion, than Volvo's other vertical displays that look very outdated. This one runs on a Google-based system. You can see Google Maps right here. Looks very excellent, super responsive. Probably some of the fastest, just most responsive tech you can get in a car these days, since it is Google-based. You can see that the very top screen is basically where they took what is normally in front of the driver and just stuck it to the very top of the tablet. And that is a huge complaint people have with this vehicle. And I agree, it's just very, you know, Volvo says they're doing it for the simplicity of the design language in the vehicle. But unfortunately, it's just very inconvenient to have to take your eyes away from, you know, straight ahead and look over to this tablet display in order to see what gear you're in, what range you have, and your driver assistance display will show right there. It'll show you if there are cars nearby, very similar to what Tesla does. But yeah, a lot of the important things that you want, like how fast you're going, also only show here. A heads-up display would nullify a lot of those issues, but this doesn't have it. So unfortunately, it just is kind of a weird design in my opinion. Otherwise, in this display, it is very snappy, very widget-like here, kind of similar to what BMW does as well. All your climate control functions are in here, unfortunately, so there's nothing you can do without going into the system, which is obviously something people really dislike these days. Change the temperature, you have to click this button and then go up and down, and in similar Volvo fashion to every other vehicle they have, you can only do it by even numbers, which is always interesting. Settings are intuitive though. This is going to be your quick control menu, very easy to turn off and on a lot of features like that. Now, interesting thing tech-wise is that this does come with standard wireless Apple CarPlay, but not Android Auto. So unfortunately, Android users do not get the integration here, which is very interesting. I guess it's probably because they just expect you to use Google Maps here, but obviously for the music integration, that's going to be a little bit annoying. So otherwise, the screen is fine. It's very fast. It's good. It's a significant improvement over Volvo's previous tech. Of course, going into the driver portion here, there is nothing to talk about. There is no screen here, except you have this little driver monitoring software, which is a little creepy, but honestly, it hasn't been very invasive in my opinion. A lot of people have noted that it is very sensitive in terms of if you take your eyes off the road for any sort of reason, but personally for me, it's actually been totally fine. You've got some nice thick turnstiles here. The Volvo does the interesting thing where when you signal left or right, it actually just goes back to the neutral position, and in order to cancel it, you have to do a short up and down movement. So kind of unintuitive. I don't love that. I don't know why people decide to change something that is just a good thing that works in every vehicle. Similar to Mercedes, they have the gear shift all on the right stalk here. No paddle shifters or anything like that for this vehicle. All of these are very intuitive, but get very dirty since it is glossy piano black plastic here. But these are all haptic control buttons. They feel good, they feel responsive, generally pretty easy to hit. I'm guessing I'd have some more buttons here if I had a power package or something like that. Media controls on the right, and then adaptive cruise control functions on the left-hand side here. And adaptive cruise control is quite confusing. It took me a lot. I had to Google how to use it effectively because I did not understand how to set your follow distance, right? I was like, I would expect usually some button like that, but it's set in the middle panel. So it's a very weird function where you have to go in here and adjust if you want your follow distance to be like slow, medium, or fast or something like that. I forgot the verbiage they use, but it's weird. It doesn't feel good. I really wish they just did a normal button here. I guess they wanted to keep it clean for some other purpose. Otherwise, the steering wheel does feel good. Feels very solid. It is kind of a circular, squarish sort of design, so kind of a unique looking steering wheel here, but it's fine. It feels very simple. It's leather wrapped. It feels luxurious. You got some more blue everywhere, as I mentioned before. You've got that same sort of charcoal pattern here that feels kind of dirty, I suppose, but I'm sure some people like it. Otherwise, you've got a very large amount of visibility. I think that's one thing that I compliment on this Volvo, is that you've got a great visibility for such a small vehicle, huge rear view mirror right here, and a huge pano sunroof as well. You've also got large windows across the entire vehicle, so this does feel like a very airy cabin. You can also see in the middle area here, this is a very interesting part of the vehicle. With all EVs, you've always got a lot of space. You've got the flat floor at the bottom, and then you've also got a wireless charging pad, and that is standard on this vehicle. The interesting thing is that you need to put your key card in there in order to start the car. In order to go from park to reverse or drive, I have to put this key card here, it'll detect it, and then it'll let me. If I don't, it'll give me an error there saying that I need to move the key card to view position. Once I start driving, I can move this away and put my phone there to charge. Obviously, the goal here is that you use your digital key, use your phone as your digital key, and then you can just put your phone there, it'll sense it, and then you can drive off. But if I don't have that, I have to use this card, and it just feels like weird. It feels strange, it feels unnecessarily complicated. All right, let's talk about this thing. This thing is super cool. You can move this and modulate a lot of things in this vehicle, and this is heavy. This feels good and robust. It doesn't feel like it's going to break at any second. So I love the modularity of this vehicle. You can do a lot of cool things with it. You'll also notice on the door panels, literally no buttons. So memory seating, all that sort of stuff is in the infotainment system. Not the greatest design. You've got these window switches here, which is such a weird place to put them. And if you want to adjust your rear windows, you can tap that button as well. And then lock and unlock is here. So it's pretty hard to figure out where things are when you first get in this vehicle. This is on a storage thing. Can't open this on any direction, but you've got a very large storage bin here. You can open it and you'll see it's actually blue inside as well, which is pretty cool. All right, now let's take a look at the second row of the 2025 Volvo EX30. So I really do like the contrast of the vapor gray with the blue indigo and the charcoal. I think it's a very nice looking color, and I'm really glad that Volvo is doing something interesting. You can also get green seats. That's the other option for the interiors, to get the green seats, which is super cool. So you've got green or blue, very interesting options. And I think those are the only options. So very non-standard colors for a Volvo here. But looking at the rear seats, you can already tell they are quite small. So this is a subcompact SUV, definitely not meant to be a huge vehicle. It is definitely going to feel a little tight in the rear here. So you can kind of see that headroom is actually quite fantastic because you've got this beautiful, huge pano sunroof. It is absolutely beautiful. One of my favorite parts of this vehicle is that airiness of that pano sunroof. Aside from that, you've got large windows like I mentioned before, but legroom is not going to be the greatest. This is at my normal seating position as the driver, and I've got some legroom, but of course thigh support is very little. The seating position just isn't the most comfortable thing. Not terrible, but certainly more geared towards maybe having a toddler in the back seat here. Like I said before, this is another modular thing. You can literally remove this, you can put something else there, but that's very cool, right? I think I like the idea. The idea of this vehicle is to keep things simplistic and modular, but unfortunately, I think they just don't execute it too well on this. But again, this is going to be their first vehicle kind of in this segment, the subcompact electric luxury SUV segment, and there aren't that many rivals, like I mentioned, right? You've got the Hyundai Kona, you've got the Kia Niro, so I expect that this is a pretty early iteration, and Volvo is focusing on the EX name brand, right? They've got the EX90, which looks fantastic, and I've heard great things about, but that one's a bit more normal. This one, clearly they're trying to design it to be a much more affordable option, which is great, and I love the affordability of that $45,000 price point. But again, the interior is certainly not going to be up to snuff as what you might expect in some other Volvos. Not too much storage in the back. One thing that is very glaringly missing is going to be cup holders. So if you have some cups in the back, you are going to be holding them, or yeah, it's not going to be the easiest thing to transport a lot of things in the rear here. You can lower the rear seats though to get a bit more storage if you need some more trunk space. And then of course you've got your window switches in the middle, kind of the same as the front, not the greatest design in my opinion. And then you've also got 2 USB ports. You've also got 2 USB ports at the front under that little hidden console essentially. So you do have a plethora of modern charging options, more storage right here. It's actually quite deep. You can fit, you know, playing cards or whatever in there. All right, driving the 2025 Volvo EX30 here through downtown Chicago. Like I said, this beautiful pano sunroof lets so much light in. It's a really beautiful car in general. I think the exterior is super nice. I love the exterior of the vehicle. I think the interior quality is quite nice as well. For $45,000, I actually think this is quite an excellent bargain in terms of a luxury vehicle, because you do get a lot in terms of features. You get blind spot monitor standard, you get front and rear parking sensors, no 360 camera unless you upgrade to the higher trim, the Ultra, but you also get adaptive cruise control standard, and it's decent. In general, the rear view camera quality is good. The sound system, like I said, is fantastic, phenomenal, but really it's just going to be the usability of this vehicle that is certainly not up to snuff compared to some rivals like the, you know, BMW X1, which is going to be more expensive. But in terms of usability, it's really just a frustrating fact that you don't have anything here, and I have to look away from driving to see anything, right? I have to look here to figure out my speed. It's just not a great system, and I think Tesla realized that very quickly, since the Model 3 Highland doesn't have the, you know, lack of the driver gauge cluster there. But on this vehicle, I think it's just not a great implementation in my opinion. A lot of the things they clean up in terms of the, you know, just general modularity of being able to change how everything appears, they did a pretty good job, and I think they succeeded in doing a lot of that. For example, with the seat adjustments, the power seat adjustments here, you have to hit a button to change to lumbar adjustments. You hit a button to change to, I think, the bottom seat adjustments, and then the rest is going to be for your tilt. So it's weird. It's not intuitive. I think a lot of people are going to struggle with getting used to that, especially if you're just renting this car for a few days like I did. Once you live with it, I think you can get past a lot of those issues. And, you know, the key card issue, for example, isn't also, you know, the most valid complaint, because I do think Volvo is expecting that most people are using the digital key function, in which case it does function very similarly to most other EVs as well. So in terms of living with the vehicle, I do think it's pretty nice. Like I said, it's relatively affordable for a Volvo, certainly cheaper than some of their other luxury products as well, but it's not that big. So it's going to be a pretty small vehicle. There's not going to be that much you can haul around with it. Like I said, I think most people won't really want to use it for larger families, maybe when they're younger with smaller kids, toddlers, things like that. In terms of actually the driving experience though, that is a very big positive of this vehicle. Driving is super smooth. Like all EVs, it is just a very isolated cabin. It feels really quiet. Coming to a stop is effortless. You know, starting is also effortless. 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds is very impressive, right? 422 horsepower for this very small and light vehicle is very cool. You can get up to speed so fast. I really haven't had a chance to test it that much here in Chicago, but that is a really insane number to think about. It's the quickest production Volvo right now, which is super cool to think about. Now, since the vehicle is quite small, it is pretty nimble. I think it does a good job taking corners and stuff like that. It does feel certainly quite small, right? Like it feels more like a hatchback than some of the other larger vehicles, you know, like the XC60, for example. So I think that does good things for its driving dynamics, but at the same time, it's still not going to be as nimble as, you know, some other actual smaller sporty sedans, right? So don't let that 0 to 60 number fool you into thinking that this is an actual athletic car or anything like that, right? Like this is still at the core subcompact SUV. So still going to be something that is meant more to be a family hauler and an easy sort of city car, right? Like just something that you can kind of go in and out, you know, make short drives, slightly longer drives. Again, this range isn't that great, right? You've got 163 miles left at 65%. I believe the entire range is usually about 250 miles as estimated, but I was getting closer to about 230-ish or so, even though it is the peak of summer here in Chicago. Overall, I think for this vehicle, you just really have to know what you're buying, right? You're buying a pretty affordable Volvo. You've got that sort of historic legacy of it being a very safe vehicle, a safe family-friendly vehicle. It's not going to be the most interesting, fun thing, but 0 to 60 in 3.4 is a nice party trick you can show people, right? That'll blow most people's socks off. I think the average person getting in this vehicle would never expect it to be that fast. So I think it's actually very fun for city driving, right? Just like stop and go, even just being able to do quick accelerations from stoplights to stoplights. That's all very good and fun. And I think that that's more than you would expect for a $45,000 Volvo. So I think that area does very well. But if you are expecting this to be a hauler, a true practical family vehicle that you can take for your trips to IKEA and things like that, you're going to find over time that you're missing certain amenities in the vehicle. I also feel like most people will probably get annoyed with the tech at the beginning, but once they kind of get over that learning curve and some of those minor annoyances, I do think that overall this is a very pleasant vehicle. I really appreciate that Volvo has done a lot in terms of the interior refinement to make it, you know, prettier, like the indigo knit things and like just the charcoal texture. Like that's all cool and it's all unique, and I really appreciate that Volvo's doing that. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk through today. Thank you guys so much for watching my review. You can check out my other reviews up here and subscribe down here for more content. All right, see you guys in the next review. Bye.